Rachel Brosnahan, the Emmy Award-winning actor who played the witty housewife turned stand-up comic in the acclaimed, the beloved, the series Marvelous Miss Maisel, one of my favorites. She's now back receiving rave reviews for her portrayal of the iconic reporter Lois Lane in the new Superman film. In the movie, Lois is secretly dating Clark Kent, a.k.a. Superman, people, played by the actor David Corenswet.
Ready?
Let's do it, Cronkite.
Superman.
Miss Lane.
Recently, you've come under a lot of fire for
I don't
what
know if
some
it's
might.
a lot of fire,
It's
but-
a lot. Today, the Secretary of Defense said he was going to look into your actions in Bravia. That's funny?
It's not funny. It's just, I mean, come on. My actions? I stopped a war.
Maybe.
Not maybe. I did.
Okay.
Rachel Brosnahan joins us now. Rachel, so great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Congrats on the movie. It's terrific. We've all
really
seen
is.
it.
Thank
Big
you
fans.
very
Big
much.
fans.
It's great.
Apparently, you were a fan of Margot Kidder's portrayal of the original Lois Lane, so you were thrilled to get the call. And there's a producer's note here that says Rachel was in the bathroom when she got the phone call for this part.
No, it's now, you get asked once and it's become this infamous story because of how glamorous it is.
Yes. Right.
That's Hollywood, baby. It's just the worst place ever to be when you get that call.
But you're thrilled. You're excited.
Yes, I
You
was
don't have to
very
think
excited.
twice.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
And why were you so
Easy
excited
yes.
about the role?
I mean, I grew up loving fantasy, loving magic, movies and books and stories. I feel like they just transport you into other worlds, and I've always wanted to be a part of something like that. And to be able to step into the shoes of a character this iconic was a dream I didn't know I had. And it's just been so much fun.
Throughout the history of this character, because of how she sees Clark Kent and Superman, and how she is literally sometimes swept up off her feet, there's a misconception about her. But you say that Lois Lane is not a damsel in distress. Why?
Yeah, I feel like damsel in distress we take that to mean inactive or not capable of taking care of yourself. And that's never been Lois Lane in any iteration, really, of the movies or the comics. She's somebody who's perfectly capable. And one of the things I love about her story and about this sort of portrayal of her as James wrote her is that he balances both things really deftly. She's somebody who's completely capable she can rely on her own smarts and instinct, but sometimes you need someone to help you, whether it's a Superman or someone else, and that doesn't make you any less strong or any less capable.
Right.
We all need that sometimes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I loved most in the movie was the dog, was Crypto. But you said he just kind of steals moments. You said he was tougher to work with than doing like the stunts when you guys were flying.
Oh yeah, biggest diva on set. No, I mean I shot with nothing there when I shot with Crypto, which was,
interesting.
You think you've done quite a lot. I've been around for a while. Shooting with nothing as a dog was a new one for me. That was probably the hardest date for me on set.
Was there for you, when I say I love that, there were many things about this I loved. The chemistry that you had, the group of characters you're working with. Was there one thing that stood out to you from this set that really was a favorite moment?
There are a bunch, but one that really sticks out is the brilliant actor who plays Mr. Terrific.
Oh,
Eddie
my God.
Peggy. Isn't he amazing?
Incredible.
Yes. I mean, he's been around and he's been amazing forever, but I just can't wait for more people to meet Eddie.
I left wanting more of him.
Me too.
Yeah.
He needs his own movie.
Well, we're going to see
I'm
more
sure
of
we're gonna get
everything,
more,
because that's
right?
the whole point of this film, is to build out this DC
There you go.
universe, right?
Yeah.
There you go, Vlad.
One of the things, Rachel, you and I were talking about backstage, you did, as part of your research, you interviewed investigative reporters and journalists for this. And one of the things that struck me in that scene that we show is Lois loves Clark, loves Kal-El, loves Superman. And in that scene, you get a very good insight into their two different worldviews. You could very easily give him the benefit of the doubt as he tries to explain himself. But you don't hold his feet to the fire.
Yeah.
Why did you do that as Lois Lane?
Well, one of the things I appreciate about James's script is that journalism is really integral to it. And Lois is somebody who has very strong beliefs about ethics in journalism, her own journalistic integrity, and she's unwilling to compromise it, even for somebody that she loves. And I think it's part of what earns her that title of Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. And I love that scene so much because I think, as you said, you get to see all the different colors of these characters and their relationships and their worldviews. And it's fun to watch two really passionate people bump up against each other in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sorry.
Go ahead,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say because I think the other interesting aspect of this is we see Superman's humanity, which is something that hasn't been portrayed. I mean, he's this all-powerful being, but he gets annoyed that people are using that hashtag.
Social
on the
media annoys
internet.
us all.
Yeah.
Well, David said, and I'm going to butcher his words a little bit, but David has said that one of the things that he loves about Superman is that he just loves being Superman.
Right.
He takes great pride in the role that he plays in society, in helping people, in what he can do to help people. And so he's a little bit befuddled by the idea that people are turning on him. And I love that you get to see that side of him in this film that is not always so perfect. For an invincible man, he's kind of met his match in Lois Lane. They've met their match in each other.
Yeah.
In real life, you guys on this press tour have been highlighting some local superheroes.
Yeah, I love this.
Yeah, this
Really
was a great
cool.
story. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels so true to the spirit of Superman that David has really beautifully articulated, which is that he does the right thing because it's the right thing to do, but he's also somebody who is in a position of power. He could do anything, but he chooses to do good, and he chooses to walk among people because he believes in them and he believes in the goodness of people. And it just felt in line with the film itself, and we had an opportunity as we were traveling the world to be able to recognize some local superheroes on the ground. So we've been sharing organizations that people in Manila and Rio and London, Los Angeles and New York have shared with us and are just spotlighting them. So check it out on our
awesome.
Instagram.
Well, you are the marvelous Lois Lane in this film. Marvelous.
And we want Mrs. Maisel back, too.
want
her back. How's Faith? Talk to her back.
Reverend Palladino.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Superman is in theaters and IMAX, which would be a great place to see it starting tomorrow.
First of all, David, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. This is my turf.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask. Well, I'm a little unclear. What part of Hollywood is this? Where are we? Yeah.
This is the Hollywood suburb known as Philadelphia.
Oh, that's right. I see.
And this is the theater that I did my first professional play in when I was 9 years old.
All My Sons?
All My Sons by Arthur Miller. You know, because these actors all have headshots, but I wasn't an actor yet, so we were just going through
it's just a kid at
photos of
school.
me. Yeah, it was just a photo we found. David Corenswet, Bert, is a fourth grader who is a big fan of the Marx Brothers, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, Bill Irwin, and of course, Star Wars. He also loves building with Legos. All My Sons marks his first appearance on the legitimate stage, which is, I hadn't read that sentence.
Where
was
your illegitimate one?
Well, so that's a reference to Bill Irwin and his three-man show called The Regard of Flight, which is probably a pretty little-known show. But if Bill ever watches this, there's a VHS of this show he did in the 80s, I think on Broadway, that my dad saw in person, and then there was a VHS tape of it that he rented from the library every other weekend. So that was the movie that we watched the most growing up, and that's a very obscure reference to one of his lines in that show.
The legitimate stage.
The legitimate stage.
Bill Irwin, there's no bigger fan of silent comedy stars than Bill Irwin.
Yeah. And one of the few living sort of stewards of the tradition.
Yeah, getting Bill Irwin to talk about Harold Lloyd is a treat. We've had him on TCM talking about Harold Lloyd.
He came and taught a master class at Juilliard, and he taught a lot. But I remember him teaching us how to trip on stage, and that was pretty magical.
Bill Irwin taught you how to trip on stage. What's the key? Like toe? Like, do you remember?
I honestly don't remember. I did. It was sort of an experience of a magician coming and explaining a trick, and you're going, "You do it better. I'll just watch you do it."
So you do it. Yeah. So there aren't a lot of kids 9 years old, 8, 9 years old, who it almost feels like Star Wars is thrown in as a perfunctory, "Hey, I'm a normal kid," right? But it starts with Marx Brothers and Fred and Ginger.
Yep. Yeah.
How did that happen?
I think it was just. We didn't have cable growing up, and television was not allowed or a part of our sort of daily routine. But we did watch a lot of movies growing up. We would rent movies at the video store down the street. From my mom would watch great films. I remember watching Indiana Jones over her shoulder for the first time when I was probably too young. And I remember watching Star Wars over her shoulder for the first time and getting to the scene where they've escaped the Death Star and Leia says that was too easy and she leaves and Luke and Han discuss their sort of euphemistically their attraction to her. And I just remember thinking, this is boring. But obviously the rest of the movie was very exciting for a 7-year-old or however old I was. But on my dad's side, and my mom had great appreciation for this too, but it was a lot of movie musicals and black and white films, specifically the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies, and the Marx Brothers movies, which were funny enough to be appreciable by a 6-7-year-old.
Yeah, you crowd 38 people into a tiny stateroom, right?
Yeah,
you know,
that's funny. Yeah,
that's just going to work.
But the great thing about the Marx Brothers, where I feel not to denigrate any other great comedic legends, but where the Three Stooges, I feel, sort of get left behind in your childhood to an extent. The Marx Brothers have that great thing of there's plenty of physical comedy for a kid, and then when you get older, as with great movies that you watch as a kid, you realize all of the dirty jokes you were missing as a kid, and all of the sophisticated turns of phrases and those things. So I think that's my dad liked the idea of that we could grow into the films.
So why did your parents ban television?
I think my dad would take credit for that. My mom was just generally a little more relaxed about stuff, about that kind of stuff.
Did they want you to read?
I mean, it wasn't. I think it was more the great films. I think they both were great, had great appreciation for great films, and just felt like maybe television could sort of, in the way that it sometimes gets left on in the house. Also, it was the ads, I think, for my dad, the commercials. Anytime we were watching TV, if we were watching a sports game or something, he always insisted on muting the television when the commercials came on.
So, but what drew you to acting? Like, where did that?
Well, my dad was an actor for about 6 or 7 years.
On the stage, like locally?
On the stage in New York. He graduated from college, had been kind of miserable at school because he hadn't gotten to do a lot of acting, and moved to New York, and at some point got his equity card and did some equity shows. Nothing that I would say was sort of remarkable from a public point of view. I did some background work on some soap operas and some films. Eventually ended up going to law school, which was where he met my mom and where the next chapter of his life started.
So you could tell that was something that mattered to your dad growing up.
Yeah, it was part of his identity, I would say. And later, by the time my sister and I were born, he was just a great appreciator of theater. So we would go to see plays, and he was always the one laughing the loudest in the audience. He was one of those audience members where the people sitting around him got kind of frustrated, but the actors afterwards would come up and say, thank you for laughing.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So he sort of clearly instilled in you that this was something magical. I mean, you could tell, the impact it has on a kid to see the thing that makes their father really happy.
Yeah.
Right? Like even if you don't process that directly, that seeps into you.
Yeah, but I never worried. There was never a risk that I was going to do it to please him. It was just that his appreciation for it made me think, well, there must be something to appreciate there.
Yeah, no, I think that's what it is. I think, of course, it could be to please him, but you can tell, like, boy, this makes something tells a kid that this the thing that makes my dad happy.
There's got to be something to it.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there plenty of kids who are child actors? Most don't go on to have a career at it. So when did it start occurring to you that maybe this is what you wanted to do for a living?
Really not until I was at school. I was at Juilliard.
But if you go to Juilliard,
So I remember thinking when I was a senior in high school applying to schools, I had been doing theater. I'd been doing professional theater in Philadelphia for 7 years. I had done something like 8 shows extracurricularly. And then I'd been doing theater in high school. I did the great Upper Darby Summer Stage program, which is having its 50th anniversary this summer, which I'm missing to promote Superman. Unfortunately, I wish I could be there. But so every summer I did 2 or 3 musicals at this great program. But when it came time to apply to schools and you're sort of thinking of it as a career, I knew that you could apply for conservatories, and a lot of my friends were auditioning for musical theater programs, BFA programs, but still nobody could really describe to me what a career as an actor looked like. So I applied to the University of Pennsylvania because I thought I'm not ready to commit to a path that I don't know what it looks like, and that field, more of the people I went to school with were applying to good schools and hoping to get in and sort of figure it out from there. And I happened to apply early decision, which meant that once I got in, even though I was planning to audition for Juilliard and NYU, and I did a play extracurricularly with a independent student group, and it occurred to me at that point that I was looking at it differently than anybody else in the play with me. Everybody was good and everybody liked doing it, but when it came time to putting in extra time or extra work to make the play even better, or to make something work that wasn't working, I got a lot of eye rolls and sort of like, come on, I need to get home. I need to get back to my dorm. I got homework to do. I want to wait, And I thought, oh, okay, this is what I want to spend my extra time
Something
on.
clicked. This was what was exciting.
Yeah, but it wasn't until when I was at Juilliard with these 17 other actors.
You transferred after your freshman year?
Yeah, I spent 1 year at Penn, and in my second semester I auditioned and got into Juilliard. And it was meeting the people at my audition days, the teachers and the other students, the prospective students, and then meeting the people who would become my classmates, where I thought these are the people who I should be spending 4 years with.
And so I'm all curious. I love actors. So are you thinking then, as you work your way in Juilliard and things are going well, you're meeting these people, are you thinking, I'm going to have this lovely career, hopefully on Broadway, some off Broadway, or do you think I'm going to make movies?
It's a good question. I made my first student film when I was the summer before I went to Juilliard. I had no concept of what making a film really meant. I made a couple commercials when I was a kid, but
you're adorable, by the way. So
thank you.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Well, but also,
turns out, I like to tell people when they're adorable.
Turns out, I was also great with a teleprompter as 11 years old. So Juilliard is essentially 100% theater focused. All of the work you do in there is theater, and scene study is geared towards, you've got an audience there. I know they've adjusted that in recent years in order to reorient towards the changing landscape of where, where acting students can end up making a good living. But all the work that we did was theater related. I think as I got clearer while we were at school, and as I learned more about the illustrious alumni of the school and where they had gone off to do great things, I think movies did end up being sort of the ideal or the thing to be really sought after. Broadway was never a thing that meant something to me in the abstract. I love going to see Broadway shows, but when I think of Broadway, I usually think of musicals, and although I love musicals and have done musicals, I don't know whether I'm going to end up doing musical on Broadway. Those people really know what they're doing.
Yeah, I let you breeze past your that musical theater component.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
So can you sing?
I can sing well enough. Yeah, I can carry a tune. I love music and I love singing. I have a sort of an older school baritone voice, so a lot of the modern musicals I just can't sing high enough for. But give me a Music Man or a Guys and Dolls, and that I really love that stuff.
So does Superman do any singing?
Can't tell you because some people are only coming to the movie to find out whether I sing or not. It's a very small constituent, but it's important.
That's funny. Okay, so you succeed. We're going to jump forward a little bit here. Things.
I'm following you. I'm on your train.
Did you? Where'd you move when you left Philly? Then did you move to New York? Or did you move to LA?
So I moved to New York to go to school. So I was in New York for 4 years of school and then 2 years after school. We went to LA for a week for our 4th year showcase. So we got to do some scenes for LA agents and managers.
As a student.
As a student.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with LA to an extent. Your first LA sunset
That's pretty great,
when
yeah.
you're a little jet lagged, and you just go like, well, of course they came here to make movies. It's the most romantic, and I remember cresting the ridge of the 405, and the San Fernando Valley splayed out in front of me, and the Indiana Jones theme started playing on my iPod. And I just thought, this is, of course, this is the place to make movies.
So you had the Indiana Jones theme on your iPod?
Yeah, it was back before Spotify, so it was just the playlist my iTunes playlist that I had put together. I was also behind the times, so probably other people had better setups, but the Indiana Jones theme, John Williams is sort of my musical. I was once asked in an interview if I had a superpower, what would it be? And it was to have John Williams music follow me around.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And so in that instance, you want John Williams, scoring your experience. It's a lot more romantic and epic when you crest the 405 with John Williams playing.
What else? Can you think of any other John Williams scores that would have been on that iPod? Like, did you have?
I think that's the one that's now my alarm that I wake up to.
You wake up to the Indiana
So
Jones
there was that phase where it was very exciting that you could have a song be your alarm as opposed to a terrible bell or something.
It's still a little exciting.
Yeah, well, but the problem that I think people realized is that whatever song you have as your alarm, you end up hating.
Oh, right, sure,
And
right.
there's something about the dun 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 dun. It just never gets old. I've woken up to it every morning for the last probably 5 years, and I still love listening to it.
That's great. That's a great little bit. But you never lived in LA?
So 2 years in New York after graduating, and then I got my first job that was going to shoot in LA, which was Ryan Murphy's The Politician, and so summer of 2018, I moved out to LA to shoot that, and that gave me 6 months living in LA, which was amazing. I had a lot of free time. I wasn't in the show very much, so I got to know, living in LA. And then the following fall, I started Hollywood, the next Ryan Murphy show that I worked on, and that also, luckily, shot in LA. So in conjunction with that, I moved out to LA, and I lived in LA for the next 5 years.
So you get into Ryan Murphy's universe, and you make a couple of pretty good streaming shows. I get it. You're not the biggest part, but you got a role. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You're part of this ensemble, and his ensembles are fun, I imagine. But being on a couple of pretty successful streaming shows,
To be fair, those were the biggest things that had ever happened to me by a mile, and they were, Politician. River was originally a guest star contract, and after I got cast, just before I flew to LA, I was told that I was going to be up to a series regular contract, which just meant that I was going to be out there the whole time, and I was going to be sort of available as much as he wanted to write for me. That was as close to
and a lot more money.
This is true.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. Like you can live as an actor all of a sudden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which became actually the way that was most salient to me was right after I finished The Politician in December of 2018. The next 6 months, I was able to live at home in Philly with my dad as he was dying of cancer. So if I hadn't been up to a series regular, the choice to go home to Philadelphia and live with my dad full time and not be available to audition in New York and not be able to leave if I got a job, would have been a much bigger and more difficult choice for me and for my dad. One of the reasons that my dad was okay and happy to have me come and live with him was because he knew that I had just shot this series regular role, and that we knew that Hollywood, we didn't know it was Hollywood at that point, but we knew that next Ryan Murphy show was on the horizon. So,
and that you'd be in it.
Yeah.
So I have one of the great thrills of the job at TCM is how many people stop me to say that they spent the last 6 months, a year of their parents' lives, like with them watching these movies that their parents loved, and then they get emotional about it. And I feel like so blessed that I, in some way, involved something that matters to people. That must have been clearly you bringing it up. So that time mattered to you.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I think. I was very close with my dad for most of my life. But I remember thinking at the time there probably aren't very many 25-year-olds who get to go and live with their dads for 6 months, and it was a lot of difficult things that go along with taking care of your father when he's dying and very sick. And but I think considering at least every father hopes that they go before their son.
Yeah.
And so in some sense, this is the best outcome that you could hope for, to get to spend that time with him and have the conversations that we had about life and death.
Conversations that you probably hadn't had and wouldn't have had otherwise, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, but not so much because he was dying, just because we were living together.
Yeah, right. No,
And you know, when you just go over to your parents' house for dinner, you don't get that, you know, that 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. where the talk just keeps going and everybody else is in bed, and we had a lot of those, and so we just got to subjects that you don't always get to. But yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got that.
Yeah.
But being in these two streaming shows and parts in some significant movies like Twisters, right? This is, I mean, that's making it as an actor, right? So well done. Except this, Superman is, I mean, it's a different stratosphere.
Yeah.
And with that comes some significant pressure. What if I fail? Then I've failed very publicly and very spectacular.
Well, so the great thing about having gone to Juilliard is it's spelled out from day one. You are here to get good at failing.
Yeah.
And I had so many great intellectual conversations and arguments with my teachers about this because it's an interesting paradox. Because if you get good at failing, if you get comfortable at failing, then it no longer feels like failing.
It's just what happens.
Yeah. So there's this sort of, and as an actor, you don't want to, as an actor in a scene, when you're doing your work, you don't want to lose that fear. You want to be afraid of failing because it's only failing in a way that costs you something that's interesting to an audience, that does something to your scene partner, that does something to yourself. And I'm still chasing that. I love that feeling of when you're really scared of doing something in a scene, or you're really scared that your scene partner is going to do something in a scene, because that's where you get the cost of the drama, the cost to your character, the cost to your scene partner, the stakes.
The stakes, yeah.
But spending 4 years failing dramatically, and usually in your underwear, in front of 17 of your closest friends and the teachers who you admire the most and respect the most and want praise from the most in the world, that does sort of take the edge off of failure in the normal sense. I certainly don't want to be bad as an actor. I don't want to turn in a performance that people think is bad or dumb or silly or doesn't ring true. But I have good methods for bulwarking against that, or at least against my worry about that, which is basically that I make my commitment not to the audience, but to my director and to my scene partners and to the crew, the hundreds of people who are watching me work every day. And I commit that if they go home happy at the end of the day, and if they let me go home, you know, if they say, all right, that's good, we got it,
Right.
then I'm gonna say I did my best. And if I ever feel like I haven't done my best, I'll always ask for another chance. I'll always ask for feedback. I'll ask for help from anybody. If my boom operator has an idea of how I could be better, I'll take it. Because all I can do really, all of my work happens there on set in front of these people. If they're happy, then at least, it's still possible that my performance could be, it's very possible, it's happened. But at least I can look back and honestly think there was nothing else I could have done. I really tried to do everything I could do.
But one of the scenes that I have seen is the full 10-minute
The interview scene.
argument.
Yeah.
The interview scene, right. But it's an interview scene between you and Rachel Brosnahan, Lois Lane, and you're, I don't know, Clark Kent and Superman, sort of at the same time in this interview. And it turns into an argument. Right? But it's quite something. And there's a moment that I don't think any of us have seen from any Superman where you get angry, and not in a brooding way, and not in a simmering anger way, in a yelling, "You're not paying attention to me," right? You say, "Yeah, people were going to die," and you're pissed. So one, very comfortable for you, I think, right? An argument where it's leading somewhere. It's about something that matters, right? You're not just bickering, right?
Yep.
But we are getting a side of Superman that I don't think we've seen in the other actors who've played the part.
Well, the fun of Superman is, as with a lot of superheroes, but I think even more so with Superman, is the alter ego and the superhero are both sort of characters, where Superman is very presentationally powerful and calm and stoic and reassuring and friendly, and Clark is often a bit more intellectual and sometimes portrayed as bumbling or a little awkward or just nobody pays attention to him. He's just not remarkable. And one great thing that James was really focused on from the beginning was this third character, who we haven't figured out what to call him yet, whether it's Kal-El or Clark. But rather than thinking about one, either Superman or Clark Kent is the real one and the other is the alter ego, which you can go back and forth on, that there's a third, truer version of him, which is the version of him when he's with somebody who knows that he's both. So, and in our version, that's Ma and Pa Kent, who know that he's Superman and know that he's Clark and grew up with, he grew up with them. And Lois Lane, who knows that he's both of these characters, and she interacts with him as a journalist as Superman, and she interacts with him as a colleague as Clark Kent. And so she sees these characters, and she's one of the only people who gets to see him when he's not playing either character and he's a little bit of both. And so that scene, I think, is the crux of that character that we see. And the reality is that when he doesn't have to be Superman, when he doesn't have to be this calm, reassuring presence to the public, when he doesn't have to symbolize safety and security and truth and justice and all those good things, he still feels those values. But just like when a firefighter comes home, or a paramedic comes home, they might get frustrated or they might panic about something, where in the course of doing their job, they would never let themselves panic or yell or raise their voice or convey that kind of instability or uncertainty. With Lois alone, even though they are technically recording, that's part of the scene, is that he keeps kind of forgetting that he's on the record at this point. It becomes just between him and Lois. You're able to see not his anger at Lois, but his frustration with the perspective that she's representing, and his passion about how certain he is that he's doing the right thing. Yeah,
it's interesting because in all the incarnations of Clark that I've seen, he's playing a character, right? But here, you get to see Clark with the full knowledge of this burden that he carries, right? And this privilege that.
Well, in that, I think burden is the wrong word to describe. I think the great thing about Superman is that he never feels that his responsibility is a burden.
Responsibility is
it's his responsibility, and it is not a responsibility that has been thrust on him. It's not the Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility, and it's not the Batman, I have a responsibility to my city, to clean up this scum. It's that Superman wants to help people, and so he feels a responsibility to follow through on that, because why wouldn't you? You want to do it.
So that gets into what can be a problem with Superman, and it has been for me, but I'm not a huge comic book guy, but in the Superman movies, I always think, well, this is not interesting because these aren't real stakes.
Right.
It's a problem. It's not just Superman. It's a problem with a lot of superhero movies, right?
But Superman is, I bet, traditionally there is that, he's invincible and he has no internal struggle. So, what's the problem?
Yeah, right. So especially in this complicated world we live in, what place is there for a guy like that?
Well, Grant Morrison, who was the artist for All-Star Superman, which was a great Superman comic that I did not know of before this film, but was the one that James told me to go and read. There's a great interview with him talking about the inspiration for All-Star Superman, and he describes just this. People say, you know, if he can't be hurt, and if he doesn't have some traumatic past that he's trying to fight against, then what are the stakes? And his answer is all of the important ones. The fact that he can't save everybody, the fact that
people are going to die.
People are going to die, and they need to. I mean, it would be almost nonsensical to stop death. I mean, there would be all kinds of problems. That's not worth getting into. That's a whole philosophical thing. But yes, people are going to die. He has relationships with people that he wants to maintain, and being physically invincible and not being a dark and brooding, you know, Batman type doesn't mean you don't have interpersonal problems. You know, your girlfriend of 3 months says, "Yeah, I don't know if I still want to be with you. This is, you know, I'm not sure I'm feeling the same thing that I was feeling 3 months ago." Superman's got nothing. I mean, that's as big a problem. Those are the problems that we all deal with. Superman's not immune from that. In fact, that situation is heightened and made more dramatic by Superman's situation. And I think ultimately the thing that all of this does for the character is it elevates his one big problem, which is his isolation, which is that he is definitively different from everybody else on Earth. He is not human. He's an alien, and he has these powers that nobody else has. And he's sort of always had these powers that nobody else has. And at the same time, he wants desperately to be a part of humanity. So ultimately, the dramatic stakes of Superman as a character is that he is lonely and he doesn't want to be. And I think that is the most relatable and dramatic thing if anybody thinks about it for more than a minute.
I think James said that also. Didn't James say, Gabe, that he's like, yeah, my Superman's not immortal.
This is the other. I mean, I think that the central issue is that people care about the character stakes more than anything, I think, whether they admit it or not. Now, if you're going to have a great big action movie like this one, you don't want your character to be invincible, because that does sort of take the sting out of some of the action sequences. So the great thing is finding foes for Superman that can match him or can find his weaknesses, and finding those things in the canon of the comics. But also one thing that James and I found, I don't know whether we talked about this, but just because Superman can lift a building or can, you know, lift a giant kaiju, doesn't mean it's easy. And just because you see I watched a lot of videos on bodybuilding and powerlifting when I was training, and you see a guy who can lift 1,000 pounds. Right. It's not easy.
Right, it hurt. Right, that's it.
And even when he's lifting 400 pounds, it's not like picking up a toothpick. It's difficult. He can do it, and he can do it for reps. He can do it way more than any normal human being can do. But you see the struggle. And I think the struggle is important for Superman, for our Superman, that you see how much it takes from him to do all of these amazing physical feats and to save these people and to be quick and to think quick. It's not easy. He can do it, but it's not easy. And I think as soon as you make it not easy, as soon as it costs him something to do, that's when it becomes dramatic and exciting.
One of the relatable things in this movie that you talked about Superman's loneliness is he does have a dog.
Yeah.
Right. And no man with a dog is truly lonely.
Although, when you get home and your dog has like ripped apart your briefcase and your work, and like and then is like sitting there, you know, panting and wagging like, "Did I do good, Dad?" There is sort of like an even more lonely than lonely, which is like you're standing in front of the guy who's supposed to be your best friend, and you're just like, you don't even understand that you have ruined my evening.
All I want to do is lie down, man.
Yep.
I just want to lie down, and we're watching episode of The Pit. Can you just cut me a break, man? Like, you know, I mean, I have 3 dogs, and one of them, has basically ruined the last 6 years. So it's true, but I wouldn't, you know.
But you wouldn't trade it, and that's the.
I might trade him.
Yeah, well,
I might trade that one. Yeah, but we're stuck with him. But the dog is nice. It does humanize. It's a way to humanize a character
I think
very effectively. Yeah.
James knows that, and especially for kids, I think like seeing a dog in a movie is very exciting, and especially a dog that's going to do what Crypto does, which is all the dog things, but then some pretty epic things as well.
All right, a couple big picture questions. James was eager almost to talk about, and now in 2025 is the right time to bring him back. Do you share those thoughts?
It feels like a movie that's gonna feel good to watch, and not in a cheap way, in that sort of way that we remember our favorite movies, and especially the movies that we go back and watch again and again. Apollo 13 is always one that comes back to me. You know, I don't know whether you could say, well, Apollo 13, it's very timely now again because, you know, we're sending rockets into space and civilians are going to space, and that's not what makes it timely to me. What makes Apollo 13 or that's the one that's stuck in my head now. What makes that film and other great films that I go back and rewatch, Star Wars, timely to me, is the human story, the story of good people coming together to do their best, to overcome great obstacles and to protect each other and help each other, and in the end, triumph, even if it's only for a moment. I think you want to see good people doing their best triumph. And that ultimately is what Superman's about. That ultimately is what our movie is about one ultimately good person trying to do his best in a world where it's not so easy to just keep doing your best. The struggle of just waking up every day and continuing to put one foot in front of the other, keep doing your job, keep trying to do your best, keep trying to be a good person. And when you get to watch that for 2 hours and change, you leave the theater feeling like that was a good way to, it was a good roller coaster to ride, and I wouldn't mind going back and riding it again.
At what point did the idea of playing Superman get into your head?
As a kernel that I thought would never, pop into a piece of popcorn? What's the metaphor there? It's like the smallest little scratching a while ago, probably 10 years ago.
Not as a kid?
Not as a kid. I grew up on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. Those were the superhero movies that I saw in theaters and that were really sort of relevant to me, just because of the timing of when they came out. And I think as a kid, I wouldn't describe myself as a kid who fit in that well, being a fan of the Marx Brothers. I had one very close friend who also was a fan of the Marx Brothers, and everybody else was kind of confused by me, I would say. There's something very romantic about the Peter Parker superhero story, which is that you're a nerd that gets bullied, and then you get these amazing powers, and you get to do cool things with them. And Superman, I think, is a different kind of superhero fantasy for a kid. So for me, it was that once I became an adult, a young adult, but I was in New York and I was living with roommates and navigating New York. When I
trying to make it as an actor in some
capacity. And with my classmates, getting close with my classmates, I would always sort of be branded the dad of the group. I was the one who wanted to make sure that people weren't drinking too much and people were wearing their seatbelts, not in New York, but the people were taken care of and looked after, and I didn't feel the need to be cool. I'd given up on that. I always wanted to be cool as a kid, and then by the time I got into theater school, I had given up on that. And I went to school with some very cool people to whom I was happy to cede that status. But I focused on trying to be a voice of reason and safety and stability. I wanted to be somebody who people could come to if they had issues, and I didn't get involved in the drama of school for the most part.
When people had problems, they came to you, they talked to you.
I hoped that they would. And in moments they definitely did. But sometimes you don't go to dad with your problems, you go to your friends. And so sometimes I was the last person that people would come to. But that's also, I think,
that's a role.
It's a role, and it was a role I was very proud to be put in a couple of times with some close friends. I said I now have a 1.5-year-old kid. I've said I've been a dad for a long time. I've just been waiting for a kid to prove
Right.
it.
Make it official.
But I remember one instance. I was living with my two other students, a classmate and another Juilliard student, and they were cooking in the kitchen and at like 11 p.m. because that's when you cook when you're at Juilliard because you don't get home until 11 p.m. And the smoke alarm started going off, and I was in my room in my underwear, and as soon as the smoke alarm went off, I burst out of my room, grabbed a chair, stood on it, and pressed the silence button. And in that moment, they were panicking. They had no idea how to turn it off. This thing was filled with smoke, and so I ran out and got on the chair and pressed the hush button or whatever it is. And the classmate just sort of like looked at me. You come running out of your room in your underwear and you like save the day. You literally are Superman. And I remember her saying Superman in that moment, and thinking, that's so cool that me in my underwear turning a smoke alarm off at 11 p.m. is Superman. That's Superman energy. And I really liked that. And I think Superman as the dad figure is right in a way, where that thing of like, he's not the cool guy. He's not he's not necessarily the guy you look at and you think, I want to be that guy. You're like, I want to have that guy around. I want to hang out with my friends and get into trouble. And when things go bad, I want him to show up to save the day. So that was the first, but that didn't translate into me playing him on screen. I never thought it would be, I just thought it's too impossible to imagine.
But you liked that feeling.
I liked that feeling. I liked seeing that in her face, that in her face was relief and a feeling of like everything's taken care of with a glimmer of you look ridiculous. You're in your underwear. This is ridiculous.
Just to be clear, it was just your underwear. You weren't like wearing your underwear outside your jeans.
No. It was just the underwear. And I'm sure it wasn't red. But I also I have a pragmatic orientation towards life, and so even when I got the audition for James's Superman, and even when I did the audition, and when
the audition was on tape.
It was on tape to begin with. Yeah, I did it with my wife in our self-tape setup.
She read the lowest.
She read the lowest parts, and we watched the movies and sort of I talked a little bit about my thoughts about Superman. I wrote a little letter to James or whoever wanted to read it about my thoughts about the character, which I rarely do. And even when my wife said, I think you might be the person to play this part, I just thought, it just doesn't happen. It's just not going to happen. And not because I'm a pessimist, just because I'm a pragmatist. It's amazing.
The odds are incredibly slim
and
at every point of this.
Yes, exactly. And surely, even though we're here and I'm auditioning, surely there's somebody who's going to be a better fit for this. It'd be too good to be true that James's idea of this character would be the same thing that I have to bring to the character. So it was really when. So I forgot about it, as you do most self-tapes as an actor. You put it on tape, you send it off, and then you forget about it.
It was that scene with it was the argument.
It was a shorter version of it that was that didn't have it was not the true circumstances of the film. It was adjusted to be a little more, leakable. It was if it got out, it wouldn't give anything away about the film. But it had that same tone and energy, and for James, I think he was looking specifically for the humor that was in the scene. And I immediately, when I read the scene, thought, this sounds like a scene from His Girl Friday, two reporters, working each other and getting around the question and making jokes.
Definitely has that feel.
Yeah.
And she's very good at that too.
Yes, she's extremely good at that. So it wasn't until I was told that I was going to screen test for it. That was the first moment where I thought, oh, this could actually happen.
So James said on both occasions, like one, you sent in the tape, and he was like, "Oh, I think I have him."
Yeah.
He kept going, and there were like 3 or 4 people who definitely would have been good.
Great actors.
But as soon as I saw David, I thought, "Oh, this is it." And the same thing with Rachel, and then the same thing when he put you two together.
Yeah, which is crazy. That we only read once together, and Rachel had slept about 3 hours the night before, and I had been working for 4 or 5 hours on the other stuff, doing stunt stuff, and
You already
that
had
day.
it. You had the job.
No.
Oh,
No.
oh.
We were paired up at that screen test. I think Rachel and I both thought, wait, that's it? We read the scene once. We're not going to do anything. Okay. Then it must not have gone that well, or like I don't know.
Oh, damn! These would have been great
Yeah,
parts
yeah,
to
yeah.
get. Right, yeah.
But yeah, I guess it was just clear to James.
And having you and I mean specifically her, having her a little, sleep deprived, like a reporter, right? That's like a.
James made the joke of it. We're going to have to keep you on little sleep for when we're shooting, because she does very good work on little sleep, which is a good skill to have. But she also does great work on a lot of sleep, it turns out. She's just damn good.
Given that you've had it somewhere in your head for a decade, that it'd be nice to play this character. What does the character mean to you?
Well, the way I hear that question is, what does the character mean to me in my life? And what it means to me in my life and as an actor is a role where I can honestly say, and I did ask myself this question, if this is the only role that I get to play for the rest of my life. And when I say the rest of my life, I don't mean that I'm playing it for the rest of my life. I'm saying I get to do this movie, maybe I get to do another movie, and then I don't get to play another role in my life. Would I do it? And the answer is yes. And I think I've probably stolen that from Christopher Reeve in one of the interviews that he gave. Because especially back then, there was a feeling of if you're going to play this guy, you might not get to play other parts because people aren't going to be able to see you as anything other than Superman. Where now I think people see it a little more as a launching pad for all sorts of other possibilities. But you have to, when you take a role that's going to be this visible and this iconic, even just visually iconic, and it's your face and the underwear, and I wanted to be prepared for the possibility that it wouldn't lead to a bunch of other things, that this would be the thing. And I felt really lucky that when I asked myself that question, the answer came back, yep, somebody's got to play this part, and if you're the person to play it and you give up everything else to do it, it would be worth doing.
Because you mentioned him, the similarities between you and Christopher Reeve are hard to ignore. Juilliard, trained to be theater actors. He did it for some time before he got the job. Relatively unknown. You certainly had more screen success than he had. But young and fairly unknown, Juilliard trained actors, both playing Superman.
Yeah. Both played the piano. Both learned to fly planes. Although I think he did both of those better than I did and more seriously than I did. Both had a kid sort of around the time of playing Superman, their first kid. I had my first, or my wife had our first, just as we were starting filming, and I think he had his first between the first and second, so both became fathers we watched this documentary, Superman, about him just before we started filming as a cast. We sat in the theater and watched it. And I resonated with his perspective on a lot of things as well, the way he thought about life and family and after the injury, how his perspective on life changed. I don't think there's any way or reason to try to sort of live up to Christopher Reeve. I think being the first big screen Superman, being such a successful one in every way, and having with his life set such an example in that Superman kind of way of persistence and goodwill and selflessness, and setting an example of everything's okay, reassurance and courage, even in the toughest of circumstances. I just feel grateful to get to play that character that he embodied and put into the public consciousness in such a positive and strong way. And I think every actor who gets to play Superman is playing the Superman from the comics, but is also playing the Superman of Christopher Reeve for that reason. So that is a reassuring feeling. There's no pressure or comparison in my mind. It's just a feeling of I've got that cape behind me as well.
were picked to do this movie, James, and to build this DC universe. The movie's out. It's not even a week.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
Relief, you know. The business of movies is a strange one because what you're doing is you're, committing years of your life to a project like this. So for the past 3 years, I've worked on Superman. Most of my time has been spent working on Superman. And then the movie is released, and you're like, is the public gonna like it? Are the critics gonna like it? And is it gonna make money? Unfortunately, with this one, it went well on all three of those fronts. Yeah, but I've had ones that have done well on one or none, and it's not as fun.
My first reaction to coming out of this movie was, I absolutely love it. But then I thought, my wife, I'm gonna bring her to see this film, and she's going to watch it, and she's going to say afterwards, well, who was that? And what is that character up to? And what is their superpower? For those of us who are fans, for those of us who are not even just super fans, but just fans who love Superman, but there's a normie crowd out there that wants to be entertained and likes superhero movies, but doesn't know all these different characters. What was the thought process there?
Well, when I started reading comics when I was a kid and fell in love with comic books, I didn't open up, Action Comics #1 and see Superman arriving in a spaceship to, land in the midst of a regular world, surrounded by other human beings. I opened a comic book to see Superman, who had his super friends and his, flying dog and giant robots and monsters and kaiju and sorcery and magic so extreme that it seemed like sorcery. It was that magical world that I fell in love with as much as the character of Superman. That's what the DC Universe world is. When you see Game of Thrones, you go into Game of Thrones and you see there's all these things that you're not familiar with, but you're taken up by the story and the characters and you fall in love with it. When you go to see Star Wars, nobody knew what Jedis were. Nobody knew what Ewoks were. Nobody knew what, Jawas were. And so they go into the thing, you're in another world. That's what this is. And now we have not found that there's been much of an issue with anybody with going in and seeing the fact that Superman has these supporting characters who are also superheroes.
I mean, it's gotten a high 80s on Rotten Tomatoes. Is there a sense from you that people are falling in love with the story and the character who's almost being reintroduced?
Yes, I mean, I think they're falling in love with David as Superman, who I think is as good of a Superman as anyone. And I think that they're falling in love with Rachel Brosnahan as Lois, their relationship, and then also, strangely, sort of hate falling in love with Nick Holt as Lex Luthor and the sort of negative chemistry between him and David. So I think they like all three of those characters so much they're really enjoying the film. But what I think is really speaking to people is it's a movie about kindness. It's a movie about, the man side of Superman. There's been a lot of Superman stories that have focused on the super. This one focuses on the man. And I think people really like that a lot.
What is this? Crypto!
You are depicting Superman as more human. He's still this all-powerful being, but the first image that we see of him is him bloodied in the snow. He's gotten his butt kicked.
Yeah.
Somebody said to me, I didn't like Superman until this movie because I don't like the idea of somebody being so powerful that they never get their ass kicked.
Yes, I understand that point of view. Now, there are some writers in the comics, like Grant Morrison, who took the idea of the all-powerful Superman and told great stories with it. But for me, yes, as a child, the reason I like Batman better than Superman was because Superman was just too strong at times. And I was, as a child in the 70s, Superman's powers have ebbed and waned over the years. So he started out in 1938 as pretty much just a strong guy. Bullets bounced off him. He could jump pretty high, but he wasn't the Superman we know and love. The radio serial came along, and suddenly he could shoot beams out of his eyes and fly. And then all of a sudden he got stronger and stronger until his peak of his powers when he's punching planets in half. And then the 1978 movie, making time go backwards by twisting the world around.
Yeah.
And then he was brought back down to earth a little bit with John Byrne in the 80s. And he's always had that sort of ebb and flow of how powerful is he. And I think that we're building a whole universe of characters. And I didn't want to have one guy who was so much stronger than anybody else that, a guy with a bow and arrow didn't matter.
Is that just from when you think about writing in characters, going back to, the Man of a Thousand Faces, the idea of having a weakness, an Achilles heel, is interesting, and somebody who is invulnerable is boring.
Well, we've always had kryptonite,
Yeah.
So
Right,
kryptonite,
true.
yeah, kryptonite and magic. Those are the two things
Right.
that can affect Superman. But in the comics, he's faced, doomsday and characters who were of, equal and opposing force, and has had his ass whooped, So it's happened. But I thought it was important to show him at a different angle than we've seen him previously in films.
The other thing that I think is really interesting is your decision to show Superman as less conflicted and angsty as we've seen him in previous incarnations. The film doesn't shy away from showing Superman as an active protector of life, ranging from a squirrel to a woman who is trapped on a bridge. He is a protector of all life.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's important that, Superman is always there to protect anyone who is in need, and that's how he looks at his life. His struggle in the film is internal in many ways, because it does have to do with how he views himself. He thinks of himself in a certain way for a certain reason, comes to discover some information about himself in the movie that takes him totally on his back foot, and then has to recontextualize who he is in the film. So having a personal Superman story while simultaneously having, giant monsters and robots and all that stuff is part of, I think, another thing that, people are attracted to and why they like the movie so much.
There's been a lot made about the scene between Lois and Clark where they're talking about, where she's interviewing him and talking to him about his actions as Superman. But there's another scene between the two characters that I especially appreciate. And in my mind, I thought Superman is kind of, when you think of Superman, the DC Comics hero, he's an establishment. He's the first superhero, so he's this establishment character. But we live in a world where cynicism rules. The modern world that we live in today in 2025, cynicism rules. And this conversation between Lois and Clark, where he talks about what punk rock really means to him. You redefine what punk rock is. You redefine what rebellion is. For Superman, he suggests the most punk rock thing you can do is simply be a good person and stand up for the little guy.
Yeah, kindness is punk rock. Yeah, I think that, unfortunately, Superman sometimes is thought of as old-fashioned or Pollyanna or too earnest, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he is those things. He is too earnest, and I wish that we had more of that in this world today. And I think that his earnestness is what is rebellious about him. That is edgier than other versions of these characters where they're trying to be edgy. He isn't trying to be edgy, and that is in itself edgy. That's the paradox.
And when Lois says, you think everyone is beautiful, that sort of gives me her worldview, which is she is a little bit cynical. She is a little bit.
Yeah.
So this guy just flew into Midtown and started attacking people, demanding for Superman to show up?
Yeah, it's all there in my article.
And I'd actually have to make it through your writing, Clark.
Yeah, I think that you see that with Lois and Clark, that she's more cynical than he is, but she's less idealistic.
Mm-hmm.
Superman isn't without flaws. He's a little too idealistic. He's a little stubborn, but he really believes in human beings, and he believes in goodness, and he believes in helping other people no matter what. And that's where Lois is a little bit more utilitarian in her beliefs. And so that's the conflict in their relationship, which is another key part of the story. It's about this conflict in their relationship and the different ways they look at the world, but it's also about where in their relationship this is. We've normally seen, Lois and Clark when they first meet each other and start to fall in love. Or we see them like in this great, the great TV show Superman and Lois, after they've been married. This is about a moment in which they've been dating for 3 months, and she's a realistic, smart person, and she's like, this is great. This guy's hot. I'm attracted to him. He's really nice to me. But man, I don't know about this weirdness of dating an alien from outer space who flies around in a costume and helps save squirrels, And for her, that's a difficult thing. You can see if this was real, like where, how would Lois process this relationship with this guy? And everything for me in this whole movie is about saying, okay, this is outlandish premise. There's Superman. He wears a cape. has his underwear on the outside, flies around, wears a costume, helps people. There's aliens, there's monsters, there's other superheroes, all this stuff. But what if it was real? What if these people were real? What would they really be like? What would their relationship be like? What would their conflicts be like? What would his relationship to the U.S. government be like? What would how would these things really manifest if we gave these characters as much depth as we can in a 2-hour film?
Well, that was sort of highlighted for me as a journalist when I watched that other scene, which is when she interviews Clark as Superman. And I asked Rachel this because I thought it was fascinating that she's in love with this man, and yet when she sits down to do her job, she holds his feet to the fire, even though she loves him and loves everything that he represents.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for me as what you were trying to say about journalism in that moment?
I think that, Lois is a journalist to her core. And what's her key value? It's truth. What's Superman's key value? It's life. Those are two really important things. But they aren't always, they don't always go together so well. And the minute she sits down and the minute she's questioning him, she puts on her journalist hat and she treats him like she would anyone else. Rachel and I talked, Lois is the kind of reporter that she's gotten kicked out of. She probably is not the one you want to see, at the White House.
Right.
Because she is just too, aggressive with her questioning. And I wouldn't say too aggressive. She's the way that all journalists should be if the world allowed them to be what they should be. But she takes her profession really seriously, and she doesn't balk at, questioning somebody who she cares about.
But then on the flip side, Clark as Superman, and I was trying to reconcile this myself. I was like, well, wait, he's Superman, and if he can stop a war, if he can stop innocent people from being slaughtered, who cares what your laws are? Who cares what the president has authorized or the UN is doing? I don't have time to debate this in session while people are dying. And even for me, I was like, ooh, I'm a journalist, but what if I were Superman? I would say I don't really have time to.
It's hard not to, I found that, when I wrote the scene, I didn't think Superman or Lois was right in their sort of, back and forth. I see both their points of view, but I do notice that people generally think Superman is the correct one in that argument. It's the more emotional side, right? And so when we're watching a movie, we are keyed into our emotional side, and so we agree with Superman because he's like, I'm just gonna go, and I don't think Superman even thinks about it. That's the thing. He's going and he's stopping a war from happening because people are about to die, and one country's invading another, and he's not gonna let it happen, and so he goes and he stops the war. He doesn't even think about, should I check in with the president? Should I ask somebody else? He's a little rash in that way, and that's how he lives his life. He's so fast, he's so, quick, and he's used to, the buildings falling down, he's got to stop it and save the people. And that's how he treated the war. He went straight over there and stopped it. And then she brings up all the, ramifications of that action, and maybe, she says, maybe he actually caused more harm to life than helped, because maybe the war would have been over in 2 seconds. It would have been done. They're both like, both countries. Neither one is very politically, they're not democracies. So so I think that I see her point of view too. At the end of the day, I probably do agree with Superman.
Well, what's interesting too about that then is, as you know from The Dark Knight Returns, Batman's problems with Superman have always been that he is seemingly a tool of the establishment, of the US government. And in this way, and I don't know what you're planning for Batman, but it does seem that he's more closely aligned to Batman's values in that he doesn't have time to wait for.
Yeah, I mean, it is, yes, I think that, in the comics, usually Superman and Batman, they have different ways of going about things, but they're best friends. And I think that's something that, in the future of the DCU is, we think a lot about.
Let's talk about Nick as Lex Luthor. He's amazing. And it's hard for me to see. One of my favorite movies is about a boy, and every time I see him in anything when he's playing an adult, especially like this horrible villain, my brain is like exploding at all levels.
Yeah.
But you created a world which is dominated by techno dudes, techno bros, as personified by Lex Luthor. And you also show how social media can influence world events. You've got these chaos monkeys typing on computers. Why was that important for you to show Lex as an avatar of some of the people that are running around our planet right now?
Well, I think what was important for me is that Lex Luthor is incredibly dangerous. And I think that in the past, I haven't been particularly scared of Lex Luthor. I wanted a Lex Luthor who I'm like, Superman's got his work cut out for him. And he really does. Lex has planned this all out. He wants to kill Superman. Kill Superman. Like, really kill him. And I think he's figured out some good ways to do it. I understand his point of view. You know, Lex Luthor is the smartest man in the world. He's done great things for humanity. He's a scientist and was probably considered the greatest man in the world until about 3 years ago when this guy flies in with dimples and a cape and suddenly everybody thinks he's the greatest man in the world. And Lex just cannot deal with it. It just kills him. You know, his ambition was everything. And so it's gone and it's been destroyed by this guy. And so he's sort of rationalized his own way of into believing that he is put here on Earth to destroy Superman.
I do find that this depiction of Lex Luthor is the scariest Lex Luthor I've ever seen, because I love, although we all love the Gene Hackman and all the other versions that we've seen both in the comics. Well, the comics, it gets pretty dark, but
it does.
Yeah. But on screen, I think a lot of people took notes from Hackman and sort of made him like he's an evil, brilliant genius, but kind of also funny, like your uncle who's got a lot of money, you know?
Yeah.
And, but here, he's really scary.
Yeah. I mean, I think Michael Rosenbaum in Smallville,
Smallville, super.
his Lex was pretty great and also human, you know?
Yep.
And we start out liking him, and the great thing about that TV show is that we saw the tragedy in every moment of these characters who were friends who are not going to be that way in the future. That isn't, in this movie, Lex and Superman are meeting for the very first time. But I do think that, you gotta make Lex scary. He's gotta be fully himself, and I think but also you have to understand him, I think, you have to understand his hatred of Superman, and that's what Nick gets across so beautifully, who incidentally is the nicest person on the set. And my wife and I were talking the other night, we're trying to figure out, like, why is it so often that the nicest people play the best villains? Because the nicest, the two nicest people on the whole set of Superman are Gabby, who plays the engineer, and Nick, who plays Lex. And I think it's just because, it's they have so much goodness in them, they can afford to be evil on screen, whereas a bad person, it kind of brings down being evil 24 hours a day.
I love it. As myself, being a child of immigrants, there's a moment in this film that I really appreciate, which is this understanding, which I've known since I first picked up a Superman comic, that Superman is an immigrant from another planet, or a refugee, if that's how you want to sort of term it. And he's standing up against the interest of billionaires and people who would seek to harm those of us who are not billionaires. How important was it for you to incorporate that into this story, which is part of the Superman mythos?
Well, for me, again, the center of it was about kindness in a world that isn't kind. There's no doubt that this story was created by the children of immigrants, by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in 1938. But for me, the important thing was to propagate kindness, that it's something that when I was a kid, it would have been just something we would have seen all the time in movies and TV. And I realized that it's just disappeared little by little, the importance of being kind. That little kids can go to see this movie and see a character who is powerful but kind. That adults can go and be reminded, wow, that should be something basic and normal. But now I'm looking at it in this movie and I realize how rare it is. It's even superheroes, they're all edgy and dark and brooding and, cutting people up, and anti-heroes and, and I like that stuff. I'm not saying I don't. I mean, Deadpool's my favorite franchise,
Yeah.
So, but it's like, these things are, but there's other ways to approach these things, and we're missing some of the basic human values that we all share, And even there's a moment where Superman shows compassion for Lex despite everything. And how much better would the world be if we showed compassion to the people that we disagree with? And what has the internet sort of created in us? that it's making us fight people all the time. And I mean this about everybody. I mean, we all have different political beliefs, but everybody comes from their own places. And most of us are good. Most of us are good on all political spectrums. Maybe they're wrong, but we're good. And so how do we communicate with each other and show kindness to each other, no matter what our beliefs are? If Superman can show Lex Luthor kindness, the guy who wants nothing more than to kill him, why can't we do it to a neighbor who has a different set of political beliefs than we do?
Love it. I got to ask about Batman. We just talked a little bit about it. As you plan ahead, you've got Supergirl, got Clayface coming up. We will see Batman in The Brave and the Bold, but might we see him earlier? And what kind of costume will Batman wear? Will we bring back the black and the gray?
Listen, I have no idea what Batman's gonna wear. All I know, listen, what I know for sure is what is right in front of us. Peacemaker season 2 comes out in a month.
Love Peacemaker.
Directly connected to the events of Superman, directly connected to some of the characters in Superman are now in regulars in Peacemaker. Then we go into Supergirl and Lanterns, next summer.
You're going to have all 3 Green Lanterns, Hal Jordan, John Stewart, and Guy Gardner?
And Guy Gardner,
Okay.
That's right.
Cool.
And it's basically, John Stewart's story in a lot of ways, but it's with those other characters. And then we got Clayface we're making, which is like a totally different thing. Although it's in the same universe, it's a complete horror film. And, that's one of the things that we want to do is this isn't like, there's not a company style. It's not like every movie is going to be like Superman. The original, the artists and the directors and the writers that create each one will bring their own sense to it. Just like I'm looking at all your comics over here.
Thanks, man.
Right? And those are all, look at how tonally different, look
Yes.
how different Superman looks in
Right.
those things. Look how tonally different the stories are, the way they look. And so it's like, that's what we want to bring to the films because we don't want people being bored. We want to invigorate people, so.
I'm glad you pointed out these action figures, and we talked earlier about the Mego action figures, which you seemingly had a lot more than I did.
Oh, yeah. No. I'm a Mego super fan. Yeah.
Thank you for doing this. This is awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
That was great.